I'd like to introduce and welcome our panel. John Attwood will be introducing the panelists. John is the Trust Officer in Business Development for Zia Trust. Not only is he involved with his trust business, but also is a very, very wonderful member of our board for the Parker Center for Family Business. So, John, thank you.
Okay, it's just about 4 o'clock. We're going to get you out of here at right before 5. And thanks for sticking around. I'm not sure why we got the last hour of the day, but maybe we'll move up next time, earlier in the day. You all have some feedback sheets, and in fact, if you pull that out, the experience with transitions panel, I noticed the one I picked up off the table said high value of 5. So maybe if you could just fill that out, and just somebody left a suggestion to put a 5 there for our panel. I'm not sure who that was. Smart person. Anyway, please fill those out, and the CPEs for you accountants, I think they're back on sign-up sheets, or back on that table back there underneath the sconce, or whatever you call that light thing. So, one of the things that's rewarding to me about this kind of experience is that we sort of bring academia and we bring reality, real life experiences into this time together. And we've experienced kind of, especially, thank you, Dr. Monty. I appreciate you being here. I'm very depressed now, and I need your card so I can make an appointment with you afterwards to work through some of the, okay. Let me introduce these folks to you. It's a privilege for me. Some of this information is in your notebook. Both John and Patty Buffett were born and raised in Albuquerque. Their father, George, always expected his children to work and be a part of his various business ventures. From working concession stands at the Santa Fe Rodeo, the Dukes. Everybody remember the Dukes? Go Dodgers. Sorry, I had to put that plug in. And the Albuquerque Zoo, washing concession equipment at B&H Wholesale, or copper pots at Buffett's Candies. His children learned the business from the ground up, literally. Now Patty runs the candy business, John and G2. And G2 couldn't be here today. He told me he was going to attend a Buffett concert. I think that was a Jimmy Buffett concert that he was attending. Then I began to wonder, I guess you guys are related to Jimmy Buffett as well somehow, maybe way distant in that respect. Run B&H Wholesale, concession distribution business servicing New Mexico, West Texas, and as well as parts of Arizona, Oklahoma, and southern Colorado. Oldest grandchild of George is Tyler. Tyler graduated from Oklahoma State. Go Pokes. In May of 2017, a degree in marketing and management. Worked in the business throughout school, continues to work in the business while not playing professional baseball. You were drafted by the Cincinnati Reds in the 6th round this year in June, right? Yeah. There you go. I don't know whether they're Reds fans or maybe we could veer off just a second, Tyler. Tyler was actually drafted in 2016, right?
Yes.
And you were drafted by what team?
The Astros.
Okay, and we don't know whether they're in the, go ahead and pick that up.
I was drafted by the Astros in 2016.
Why did you decide not to go play for the Astros?
To finish school.
Okay. I think I like that as well. Thought I'd just bring that in just to emphasize the finishing school thing. What's your Twitter handle, by the way?
Candyman with 4 1s.
Candyman, 4 1s, okay. It's interesting. So my other panel member is Mr. Danny Cox, CPA and a CGMA, Vice President of Finance Rio Grande, and was in a sense adopted by the Bell family. And is one of the reasons you're here today is to share the transition that the business had with you and your involvement in sort of an adopted family member way. So we're looking forward to hearing from you. one of the things I love, Anderson School of Management graduate, decided to stay here in Albuquerque, and before that was down in Montgomery, Alabama at the Alabama Christian College, now Faulkner University. You're actually a South Dakota sort of native, aren't you? And so we had a chance last night at the reception to share stories, swap stories about South Dakota, and especially the Corn Palace in Mitchell, South Dakota. How many have been or know of the Corn Palace in Mitchell, South Dakota? Look at that, isn't that exciting? That is impressive. Along with your community involvement with the Albuquerque Rescue Mission and City Lights Church as treasurer, you've been involved in, and still involved in, professional and business affiliations of the New Mexico Society of Certified Public Accountants, the New Mexico Association of Commerce and Industry, and CFO Academy as a trustee. So thank you. We're going to hear from all of you in just a moment. What we're going to talk about in these next few minutes have to do with these topics: a dead guy, weed pulling, pool sharks, drug deals, birth order, chicken fryer cleaning, delicious destinations, have something to do with Pinon, Tiffany's. So we're going to try to cover a lot of ground and give you sort of the question and answer and the opportunity to share how your family or adopted portion of the family transitioned or involved in transitioning their business. So maybe if the Buffett family, would you mind starting out by telling us, give us a brief history of how your business came about, and why did George start it, and kind of start us off there.
So our father, George, he really wanted to go into business for himself. Growing up and seeing his grandfather in Omaha run a grocery business, and he worked some in the grocery business for a couple summers, helping out his grandfather, and he really enjoyed watching his grandfather and seeing the name on the side of the building and seeing the respect that his grandfather had in the town. So he always wanted to go into business for himself. He did graduate from UNM, and his mother made the suggestion, well, why don't you become a candy maker? All you need is a pot and a stove. Well, clearly it needed a lot more than that, but that's how he initially got into the candy business. He ended up going and working for See's Candy in Los Angeles and learning. He loved telling this story, that when he applied, he told them that he had an 11th grade education, because that was true. He also happened to go on and finish college, but he was afraid if he told them he had a college degree, they wouldn't hire him to do the candy manufacturing, which is what he wanted to learn. So he started in the fall, which is when the candy business picks up, and worked out at See's through Easter, and then they laid folks off because they're not as busy during the summer. So during that time, he came back to Albuquerque, which is where his mother and brother were, and he purchased a snow cone machine and a cotton candy machine and started going to fairs and fiestas to earn money when he wasn't out in California making candy. He proceeded to do that for roughly 3 years, and then felt that he had enough knowledge about the candy making business that he was just going to stay in town. And the two businesses for quite a while complemented each other quite well, because the fairs and fiestas were so busy during the springtime through the fall, and then they kind of shut down during the winter time. Well, that's the majority of the candy business time when you're going through Christmas, Valentine's, and Easter. So that's how the genesis of Buffett's Candies really came about, as well as the concession business. That turned more into a distribution business where we were supplying other concessionaires with their products. But that's kind of how it all started.
I introduced John to someone here, a student from Anderson. I don't know whether he's still here, Daniel, Daniel, there's Daniel in the back, wave. Daniel came up to me earlier in the day and said, I'm from Mexico, I'm up here studying, and one of my dreams is to start a candy business. So I thought, gosh, it's not just George Buffett, but it's others around the world that are actually have the same dream that he did. So how did you all get started working in your family business? What roles did you have? Summer jobs, weekends? This is kind of where Tyler could talk about pulling weeds.
Well, as soon as me and the other grandkids were able to walk, we were pretty much down helping them out. I remember seeing my sister make dog bones as soon as she could see above the tables, putting white chocolate on the dog bones. But I mean, as soon as we were able to go down with our parents, they would walk out into the warehouse and say, okay, to the warehouse manager, he's here to make your job easier. You know, if you need him to pull cases off the pallets, or if you need to sweep the floors, or if there's some weeds outside that need pulling, go do it. And I hated it. But it definitely gave me an appreciation, you know, being able to work from that into, okay, now I'm not pulling weeds, now I get to clean slush puppy machines. And then you go from a slush puppy machine to a chicken fryer. So that's kind of how it started.
I'll add a little bit. When we were growing up with the concessions were really long hours. He did concessions at the drag strip, he did concessions at Speedway Park, he did the concessions at the Albuquerque Dukes, he did the concessions at the Albuquerque Zoo, he did Milne Stadium, Wilson Stadium, he did Yapple football games. So during the summers, you know, he took us along, and it was a way for him to spend time with us. It was a way for him to have us do things with him. And it was something that as his kids we actually looked forward to. I don't understand why Tyler didn't like pulling the weeds. Our dad, I think in that he was really creating a bond with us. He created a love for the business with us, and it was what we knew. And so when my kids were growing up, it's what I started doing with them. I think it creates a sense. And another thing, I mean, my dad did not. I mean, back then, child labor laws. I mean, that didn't go into effect, and minimum wage, there was no such thing. He always used to say you get paid for what you're worth, and then we knock it down a little bit because you screw around a little bit too much. And so we didn't get paid very well at all. Probably the only time we really got paid for really what we were worth was at the Albuquerque Dukes. We'd go out and we'd hustle in the stands, and we started hustling peanuts or popcorn or whatever when we were 7 years old, and we never ever got an allowance. It was whatever we made. And I can't remember, I think we made 10% of whatever we sold back then, or 5%. But that's how we made our money. So you started to learn that value of the dollar. And at the end of the night, we'd go in, and it was how much did you make, what did you do, and we'd talk about it, and it was just a way for us to be together and have something in common with our father.
And I think that also stemmed from he lost his father in a car accident when he was only 11 years old. So his mother never remarried, so it was his mom and the two boys, and he never really had a father. So he really wanted to spend time with us while he was growing his business.
What age and capacity were you when you were transitioned into the business full time?
Well, let's see. I dropped out of school when I was 21, or actually 20. So it was me when I was 20.
And I went on to school, came back to the business for just a short period of time, realized I needed some time away, went to work for Bank of America for 6.5 years, and came back when I was 29.
And then our brother G2, he was 22. He came in the business the same time I did.
Okay. When did it become evident that a succession or a transition plan was needed? What triggered that occurrence?
You know, it was interesting. I think, and listening to Dr. Monty talk, I think that wasn't something that we spent a lot of time talking to our father about. He had that, he knew that. He actually read a lot, One of the things that I think that he did that was really probably one of the smartest things he did, and partly because our business allowed it, is he kind of separated us. I went to El Paso and worked in our wholesale business in El Paso, and we only had one other employee when I got there. My brother, who came into the business about the same time as I did, he went to work in the wholesale business here in Albuquerque. And when Patty came into the business, she went into the candy business. But we had some separation, and for me, it was actually probably most important for me, because I got to kind of cut my teeth and see exactly what my strengths were, and I think at some point having some feel of failure by not getting through school like my brother and sister did. I really trying to achieve success, trying to grow that branch, and then be able to, I played a lot, I messed around a lot, and being able to screw around still was something that I did down there, and I could do it, and it wasn't someone that had a thumb on me all the time.
Where did your dad know to call when he needed to talk to you?
Yeah, I played a lot of pool and hustled a lot of pool, and so there was one pool hall that I would go to, and that's where he would call me. This is before cell phones or pagers.
But you supplemented your income actually with.
Yeah. Like I said, my dad didn't pay real well, so that
You got to do what you got to
figure
do.
other ways to make money, and that was one of them. Hustle and pull is, and I really dig the sales side of our business, and hustle and pull really taught me how to read people and how far you can push people. And when you're hustle and pull, first everyone's friendly, but to really make money at it, you got to be able to push them a little bit. And once you start beating them, they start realizing you're better than them, and then you're having to give them a spot and give them additional weight. And you have to know how far to push them without making them too damn angry where they want to kill you. So, and I learned that. And actually, I had one friend that one night was slammed up against the wall with it, and he was about 150 pounds by a big guy. And it was really rather funny because I really thought it would have happened a lot of times before that. Anyhow.
I got to know George Buffett. We were buying Christmas gifts primarily for our clients and professionals in the community that referred business to us. So I would, every Christmas, I would go and talk to him about my order, and he finally got sick of me, I think, after 3 years and said, look, you're in a very, well, not, he was pretty straightforward. He said, you're doing this all wrong. And I thought, okay, well, wow, what do I need to change? And he said, you need to kind of think outside the box a little bit. How many of the folks you know that you send this caramel corn? I thought I'd just bring some today for you guys. Yeah,
We appreciate that.
Thought George would like that. How many of your folks get Christmas gifts? And I said, well, gosh, we're inundated as a company. We've got a lot of folks that say thank you to us at Christmas. He said, well, why don't you think about this concept? Why don't you give something like this to your friends at Valentine's Day? Give them especially chocolate, let's say, at Valentine's Day. And I thought, that's kind of an interesting concept. Everybody gets everything at Christmas. What do I get at Valentine's Day from somebody? So that's how we started with working with you all, and that's been a tradition we've carried on ever since, that got a lot of compliments about. And we've varied the product over the years, different variety of things. So anyway, that's how I got started. And one of the things I will never forget about George in our initial discussions, he said, I'm going to sell you this product, whatever it is, but don't look to me for a discount. I'm not going to give you a discount. I thought, okay, well, no, that's good. He said, I'll give you a good product, but I'm not going to discount it. That's our deal. So if you like it, you like it. If you don't, that's okay. We're good. So I always respected him for that. What were the things, and Danny, we're going to give you a shot here pretty quick. Okay. What were the things about your business family that were conducive or obstructive in terms of the transition? Conflicts, you guys probably didn't have any conflicts. So talk about that. What actually was conducive, what was good, or what didn't help in terms of the transition?
You know, so I moved back up to Albuquerque, actually a year after he was born, so 21 years ago. And we kind of, by B&H, we kind of adjusted a little bit who was in charge of what. But there was still we had some issues, and it was interesting, you know, looking back at it, when you're living it, it's sometimes hard to see. And so there was some frustrations in how the operations was going, how accounting, how sales, how everyone was dealing with things. And I was actually golfing with a friend and talking to him, and he said, you know what, John, there's a consultant I know that perhaps you ought to talk to, because maybe you all talking to a consultant would be a little bit easier than talking at the dinner table where emotions run high. And so we brought a consultant in to help us work through some things, and I also think that at no time was there ever, I mean, I think very much we are a family business. It's the family first and then the business, and that was really driven from our father. So there's always been a high level of respect for my sister, for my son, for my wife, for my brother and his wife and our parents. And so, you know, I've heard some stories about family businesses that get a little ugly, and thank goodness that I think our father did some things right, that never happened. But by bringing someone in, it enabled us to, first it started out, we had some one-on-one conversations with this person, and he was able to look at it from a different perspective, and then got us talking about, okay, well, here's how I think this doesn't make sense. What would happen if we moved some of the organizational structure around? And when he said it all of a sudden, well, that does make sense. And it gave a different perspective, and it really helped us work through some issues. The one person that it was toughest on was our father, and going back to what Dr. Monty said, you know, his response at times was, well, if you would just listen to me, I can tell you what to do. And that just wasn't working. You want to add to anything on that?
And I think that what you talked about before in terms of each of us kind of having our own areas, it definitely gave us an opportunity to grow ourselves, and we're growing at different rates. We're at different places of our career and of our development. And, you know, when you and G2 came to the same place, then it was a little more conflict. You know, it's conflicts arise, and it's how are we addressing the conflicts? How are we talking about the conflicts to get it out on the table to figure out what is the next step and what does make sense? Did
your dad have a preference in terms of one of the children? Was it birth order? Was it two boys and a girl? Was there any?
Well, he had a favorite.
He had a favorite.
Sure.
Okay. Now let's not beat around the bush. Yeah.
That was his daughter, of course.
How did you handle that, John?
I learned to accept it, but yeah, I'm still sensitive to it.
You're still sensitive to it, but you've accepted it. Okay.
He had a lot of funny sayings too. I heard one today. My dad would agree with this saying 100%. Matter of fact, I think my son would agree to this saying 100%. Dr. Monty said it. Brains skip a generation. And he used to say that quite a bit. And it was quite a bit later I said, you know what, Dad? Your mom was one hell of a smart woman.
I think Dr. Monty got that from George. You can give him credit. What inspired you, Tyler, to want to move into the business, the third generation? What was it that brought that about, that desire?
Well, I think it started when he would have me come in and do some of these really bad jobs, and you know, learning from the ground up and pulling the weeds and sweeping the floors. But then when I was doing it right and I wasn't complaining and it was, okay, I got to go into work today, I might as well just get up and do it. Then he, would reward me with, okay, now you can move up a level and you can start doing some of the things that you think you want to do. And kind of what you were saying with going around town and seeing everybody knows the candy cane on Lomas, and like, okay, that's pretty cool. Everybody seemed to work for my grandpa at some point, I've been pulled aside completely on the other side of the country, and a man will come up to me and said, I work for your grandpa for a weekend, and he taught me how to work, and now I'm teaching my kids how to work. So, having that reach to the entire community and seeing what my family's been able to do for the community and seeing what the community has been able to do for my family, I would love to be able to do that and be a part of it and, put my mark on this community and someday do that for my kids.
Beautiful, beautiful. How, yeah, really. Pretty cool. So do you guys, do you all have spouses that work in the business? How's that going?
Yes, we do. And so my brother, he isn't here, and so we can pick on him.
Please, yes.
Actually, he met his wife in our business, and so she worked in the business for quite a while.
Which is how our parents met, actually.
Yep.
Our mother went to work in the candy business when she was in college, and they swear it was once she graduated and left that they went on their first date. But that is how they met.
My wife, I met her, she actually had a career in the legal field, and it wasn't until we left El Paso and moved up here, and our children were a little older, until she started doing some work in the family business.
What kind of one of our last questions, what advice would you give to families that are looking at that, moving from first to second, maybe even second to third generation? What have you learned that you'd want to share with them to pass along to their families?
Good question. I think it definitely helps if there is a mutual respect. You got to want to spend time with the people. I truly enjoy my brothers and my family. I truly enjoy them. I would spend time with them if we weren't working together and interacting together. And I think that's a huge factor for me.
I agree.
Tyler, you want to add anything to?
I haven't really gone through it yet, so
Okay.
I don't have any advice.
Okay, good. Let's move on. Danny, adopted son of the Bell family. Give us a brief story of the business, what they do, what they're doing, how it got started. This transition with Rio Grande is a little bit different from the first, second, third generation transition. And I think, to be fair to all of us in terms of family businesses, not everybody has the first, second, third generation transition. So one of the reasons we value your input on the panel is to discuss and share your story through the Bell family as to how they transitioned their business.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm not used to speaking to these, but I'm going to briefly give you an 80-year history of the company. But basically, before the transaction that we ultimately got to, we had about 400 employees. We had sales in every state in the country and probably every county in the country, plus most of the countries in the world. So they had ultimately become quite successful and quite large. And that creates a whole nother level of problems. Good problems, but problems.
What did the company do?
Oh, yes. We're a distributor to the jewelry industry. We have our customers range from Tiffany's to grandmother that makes beads on the kitchen table to bead necklaces. So we have quite a diverse customer base. I don't know if that covers it well enough. It's a lot more detailed than that. But if I go back to where it started, Saul Bell was a jeweler in St. Louis, Missouri. He was quite successful, had 3 different stores, and then the Depression hit. He did everything he could to keep those businesses going, and ultimately lost all 3 stores. He was newly married, and I'm sure there's a story behind how they ended up in New Mexico, but they decided to come to Albuquerque. He started over working at White Eagle Trading Post. So he worked there for a number of years, and then after a few years, he decided to buy White Eagle Trading Post, and then transitioned it into a jewelry supply company where he would drive around New Mexico delivering supplies to other jewelers in the state. And because of his expertise, he did a lot of training. So the business was not very big, but it was growing and fairly successful. And then in the late 60s, early 70s, he discovered he had cancer. Well, as he had been developing the business, he had also been developing a family. He had 9 kids at that point. And they ranged from adults to relatively young. So the first transition was, I have cancer. I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't know if I'm going to beat this or not. I would like the older kids to take over the business, and while I try to get through this thing. So they had the older ones had actually already started other different careers. Hugh was in New York working to become a Broadway actor. So they had quite a variety of different things. Eddie was in the Navy, I think, in Vietnam at the time. So anyway, they eventually came back as they were able to, started doing the business, and because of the cancer, because of his wisdom, he let them run the business. And they sure had their successes and failures, but they started to succeed. And then decided to get into the mail order business. And it was about the same time that turquoise was huge in New Mexico. And the business took off, really started to grow. Continued to grow, but because we were in the precious metal business, you're always replacing inventory. The commodities, the price of the commodity changes every day. So it had its difficulties. And if Hugh were talking to you, he would talk to you about all the different banks that he worked with and how he'd work with a banker for 5 years, and then they would come in one day and say, I can't do your business anymore. We don't understand precious metal. He went through that numerous times, but the business continued to grow. But the debt that came with that growth continued to follow. So it was a real challenge in terms of how do you transition this company. But as they grew the business, and they also had to deal with how to develop a management style that worked for them. And so they were early adopters of participative management. They basically said the people doing the work know how to do it better than us. So let them manage themselves, we'll help them learn how to manage themselves. So they created a participative management culture, excuse me. And also created a whole set of values for the business. We have a set of 15 principles that I actually helped finish that when they were developing them. That is really the core of the business. So again, as they were going through this growth, the number of shareholders grew as well. So you went from 9 kids and now you've got 20 plus shareholders as well, divided among different branches of the same company. So you start to look at it and think, well, how do we make this next transition? They made it through the first transition with their father, and he did defeat the cancer and went back to work for the company, but he worked for his kids. You know, he put his thumb down once in a while, but most of the time he let them do their thing. So we went through processes where we had an ESOP plan. It really never got enough traction in terms of owning a significant percentage of the company. And at one point we had a kind of a professional manager that they brought in to try and see if they could transition out of the company, and that was a failure, and they had to get back involved and more active on a day-to-day basis. So you keep looking around saying, well, how do we make this transition? And even if there were a third generation that wanted to buy the company, how do you do that when the company has the debt that it's continuing to finance its growth? It's continuing to be successful, but it's not so successful that you get rid of all the debt. So eventually, they went to a consultant that they knew who was in the investment banking. She helped them find a different investment banker to work with us and consider putting it out on the equity market. Obviously, they had concerns. You want to keep the legacy of the company. They're concerned about the employees. They wanted to keep the participative management. So who can do all those things? They looked around at who they thought might be interested and didn't feel like they could find somebody that would fit all the needs that they had in terms of keeping the legacy of the company, not driving the employees away. And that would, as one of the employees, it was one of the concerns, obviously, is somebody else comes in and starts managing this company, is it still going to be a place you want to work? So we were real careful in terms of trying to figure out how to do that, who would present the company and market the company appropriately. And while we were in the process of working with the investment banker, doing evaluation for the business, another business in our industry was purchased. It was our largest vendor, was purchased by a company called Richline. And Alan Bell knew them quite well from industry groups, and was really surprised that they would buy them. Well, Richline was owned by Berkshire Hathaway, and he knew that they had a reputation of keeping the local management, letting the culture be as it is. So he called them and said, I didn't think you'd ever be interested in buying us, but since you bought this other company, are you looking for some vertical integration? And they were immediately interested. We went ahead and went through the process of the investment banker, and it pretty much confirmed our expectations that, equity purchases where they'll come in and buy the company, they make some changes to it, and then they're just going to resell it again, and you really lose the culture of the company. But Richline continued to have interest. We went through the process, and they did make the deal. It's almost been 5 years now. It's been a very successful transaction from our standpoint, but it's a total different kind of animal from just transferring to another family member.
You had, as a subchapter S corporation, you had family members as stockholders, but you also had others as stockholders that you had to consider.
Actually, you weren't the subchapter S. That's a whole nother issue. I don't know how much you guys want to get into tax issues, but I would say make sure you do understand the tax issues. And we knew we had tax issues, which was another complication. We had elected LIFO valuation for our inventory decades before, when silver was $2 an ounce. And by the time we were doing this transaction, silver is $30 an ounce. So the company that bought us didn't want to keep that method of inventory calculation. And we were actually trying to get out of it too, because we really wanted to get away from owning the metal and leasing the metal. But in order to do that, you basically recapture all that gain, and it was going to be millions of dollars of tax that nobody really wanted to deal with. So, it becomes a complication, and because we're a C Corp, you didn't want to be paying the individuals and the corporate, paying corporate tax, individual tax. So there were lots of tax issues, and you really need to have them all planned out in advance. It did work out quite well. Leasing, I was not a fan of leasing the metals, because during the time that I had been there for years, we had gained a lot of value just by owning the metal. But at the time of the transaction, silver was $30 an ounce, and then it dropped promptly to about 14. And if you owned that metal at the time, you took a huge loss. So it was a very good timing to have sold that metal. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. If the Bell family were sitting here today, what do you think they would want to say to this group?
Well, one thing they would say is look around at who else is in your industry. Don't assume those aren't potential buyers. be involved in your industry. Know who the other competitors are, and maybe not necessarily all the competitors that might be direct competitors, but they're in your industry. Those are the people who will probably be interested in your company.
Good, good.
And they would say that Berkshire Hathaway was a good buyer.
So let's open it up for questions to you all. There's, gosh, I don't know, I want to say 100 years combined experience here in terms of knowledge about family business and transition in that business. So please take advantage of the expertise that's here in the panel.
Danny, how many of the Bells are still working for the company?
Alan and Molly are still involved. Hugh retired at the time of the transaction. Eddie retired about 3 years later. So between those, you've got about a 90-year history with the business. Alan's planning to retire in a few years. There's another 45 years of history leaving, and Molly will be retiring sometime after that. So, our next transition is how do we run the business without any of the Bell family members involved?
Someone else?
Do you still have the ESOP?
No, we bought back all those shares before this transaction happened.
What's your advice on having an ESOP?
It depends. That's my answer most of the time. It depends. It didn't work for us. I would say, and I encourage your people to roll those funds into IRAs or something. It's amazing how many people just take the money and run. They'll pay the tax, pay the penalty.
Yeah, yeah.
They just see money right now. It's pretty sad, actually.
How many locations has Buffett got?
From the candy business, it's just 2. We have one in Ruidoso and the original one on Lomas here. B&H, though, they have a number of warehouses.
B&H has, our main office is here. We have a warehouse with distribution out of Gallup, New Mexico, a warehouse with distribution, sales, service, office people out of El Paso, and the one with all the same capabilities out of Oklahoma City.
And you manufacture your product here and then wholesale it? Is that how it works?
So B&H Wholesale is really a different business. We do specialty products to convenience stores, schools, and supermarkets. We do a slush puppy program in convenience stores. We do coffee programs. We do nacho programs, fried chicken programs. We sell popcorn, pickles to schools, concession type businesses.
Then you also have this part of your company.
And the popcorn cannery really falls under the candy business. We have a production facility down on 7th Street that we make the popcorn cannery products. We do fundraisers with school through that, but an awful lot of what it does is just to support the candy business.
You've got your product in Smith's, I think. I've seen.
Well, the popcorn cannery is in Smith's, Albertsons, John Brooks, in the grocery side of it.
It's wholesale through some distributors where you're speaking to, and then the popcorn cannery does have a small retail store, but then we sell a lot of the popcorn out of the candy store on Lomas as well as some down in Ruidoso.
What's your most, I'm doing a commercial for you guys, sorry. Obviously. What's your most popular product? And weren't you featured on television, Delicious Destinations? What was that about?
Yeah, so I got a call, and I get lots of crazy calls, and somebody started asking me about our Pignon nut roll, and they wanted to do a story on it, and it just sounded kind of bogus. But I listened, and we talked for a little bit, and he said, well, I need to get back to my producer and give him the information. And I would say a good 2 to 3 weeks went by, and he ended up calling back and said that we want to go with you. This is who we are. Andrew Zimmer from Bizarre Foods has a spin-off called Delicious Destinations. So instead of going after the weird foods, they wanted to go after the ones that everybody enjoys. And they pick a city, and then they feature 7 or 8 different places in that city where there's something good to eat. And they ended up coming to Albuquerque, and we were one of the 7 folks that they featured, and they only feature one particular product per restaurant or per location, and they did our Pignon Nut Roll. And it aired the Tuesday before Easter in 2016, and it was madness. It crashed our website. It was glorious in the hindsight. At the time being, it was pretty overwhelming, but since then it has averaged anywhere between 2 to 4 airings a month, and we have gotten website orders from all over the country, had requests from out of the country, and it's been a very interesting ride.
I just have a quick question. I'm a specialty food manufacturer, and our products are salsa and chili sauces.
Cervantes, by the way.
And one of the things that we're really having to battle on is the Food Safety Modernization Act. Will FESMA be something that you folks will have to kind of get your arms around and have to deal with as you
Yes. Short answer is yes. As up to this point, we have been so small, it hasn't mattered, but now with what they have done in terms of including everybody, and it doesn't matter the size, yes, it's stuff that we need to be looking at, absolutely.
It's a pretty grueling process.
Absolutely.
But, it's exciting that as specialty food businesses, both candy as well as salsas, chilies, whatever, that New Mexico is so well represented. We have incredible products. Buffett's, of course, I mentioned this morning, Easter Bunny in my house always goes to oh, I've got 35-year-olds that expect it. It's like, we don't want anything else, so but congratulations, thank you.
Thank you.
You all have any other questions for the panel? Any other comments you want to make? Yes, Jim?
I've got the most important question of the afternoon. Tyler, tell us about your career at Oklahoma State and then your summer with the Reds organization.
And who was your coach in Little League?
So 4 years ago, I went up to Oklahoma State. I got lucky. There were some kids that didn't perform ahead of me, and I got to slip into a starting role my freshman year, which, looking back on, was I got really lucky that happened, because then that set me up for the rest of my career. So started my freshman year, we ended up winning the Big 12 championship, won the conference. That was amazing. Hosted a regional and a super regional, and we were 2 wins away from going to Omaha. And then
That's the College World Series, by the way.
yes. So sophomore year, I wasn't performing quite as well, and I really saw the other side of the competition, so I got slipped back into the bullpen, and I didn't pitch as much as I wanted. So I didn't like that, worked really hard over the off season, and my junior year, I was in the bullpen, but I was told I was going to be the guy out of the bullpen. We get in trouble, we're going to go to you. And I ended up almost pitching in every single game, multiple innings. I thought my arm was going to fall off. But at the end of the year, we switched some stuff up, and I got back into a starting role for our postseason run. And between me, our Friday starter, who's typically like the #1 guy on the team, and our Sunday starter, who was a freshman, we won 5 games in a row and only gave up like 2 or 3 runs, and we ended up going to the College World Series. And in the College World Series, in the first 2 games, we won 1-0, and it was the first time ever that there's been back-to-back 1-0 shutouts there. So we ended up in the Final Four. I got drafted by the Astros that year, and for a number of reasons, but mostly I wanted to finish school and finish that last year with my best friends. I decided to go back, finish school, got my degree, and trusted that everybody liked me enough that they would draft me again. And if you're not familiar with the MLB draft, being a senior is a huge disadvantage. So I trust.
Why is that?
Well, because seniors are considered like they don't have any leverage. Like you're either going to come play or you're going to go work a 9-to-5 job. So I gambled a little bit knowing that I would have something just as cool to go back to. And
What's the name of the business?
Buffett's Candy.
Oh, okay, gotcha, good.
So I gambled a little bit, but I trusted that it would work out, and it did. And now I'm in the Reds organization. So I just played up in Montana for rookie ball, and I should be starting the season in Dayton, Ohio next year.
Good deal. Any other question, comments?
Just one more comment. You did notice the color of the bags.
Okay, great. Thank you all very much.